Hello, my friend, and welcome. Take a slow, deep breath. Settle in, and let this story gently carry you into a peaceful night. Now, let's begin tonight's story. On the quiet northern coast of Maine, where the Atlantic Ocean stretched farther than the eye could see, there stood an old lighthouse that had watched over the sea for more than 100 years. The lighthouse rested on a rocky cliff, surrounded by tall pine trees that whispered softly whenever the ocean breeze drifted through their branches. Its white stone walls had faded beneath countless winters, yet they still carried a quiet beauty that time had never managed to erase. Every evening, just before the last colors of sunset disappeared beyond the horizon, the great lantern at the top of the tower slowly came to life. Its warm, golden light swept gently across the darkening sea, guiding fishermen, sailors, and wandering boats safely home. For the people of the nearby village, the lighthouse was much more than a landmark. It was a familiar friend, a silent guardian, a place that somehow made every difficult day feel a little lighter. The villagers often believed the lighthouse possessed a quiet kind of magic. Not the kind found in fairy tales, not the kind that granted wishes or changed the world overnight. It was a gentler magic, the kind that helped tired hearts rest, the kind that reminded people to slow down, the kind that made silence feel comforting instead of lonely. No one could explain why they felt so peaceful whenever they climbed the narrow path leading toward the lighthouse. Perhaps it was the endless sound of the waves. Perhaps it was the fresh scent of salt carried by the cool ocean wind. Or perhaps it was simply because the world seemed to move a little more slowly there. The keeper of the lighthouse was an elderly man named Thomas Hale. Most people in the village simply called him Mr. Thomas. He had lived inside the lighthouse for almost 40 years, long enough to remember storms that no one else still talked about, long enough to recognize every fishing boat simply by the sound of its engine, long enough to know exactly how the sea would behave by watching the clouds for only a few moments. Thomas had never married. He had never owned a large house. He had never become wealthy. Yet everyone who knew him quietly agreed that he was one of the happiest people they had ever met. His smile was never loud. It appeared gently, almost as naturally as the sunrise. His voice was soft. He never hurried his words. Whenever someone spoke to him, he listened with complete attention, as though nothing else in the world mattered during that conversation. Children loved visiting the lighthouse. Thomas always kept a small wooden box filled with seashells that he had collected over the years. Every shell had a story. Some had washed ashore after great storms. Others had traveled hundreds of miles before reaching the rocky beach below the lighthouse. Whenever a child visited, Thomas would hand them a shell and say, "Every journey leaves something beautiful behind." The children rarely understood what he meant, but they always smiled anyway. Every morning, Thomas followed the same peaceful routine. He woke before sunrise without needing an alarm. The gentle sound of the ocean had become his clock many years ago. He would quietly prepare a fresh pot of coffee in the small kitchen beside the winding staircase. While the coffee brewed, he opened the front door and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The village below was still asleep. Only the distant cry of seagulls broke the silence. The sky slowly changed from deep blue to soft shades of pink and gold. Thomas never rushed those moments. He simply stood there with his warm cup resting between his hands, watching another beautiful day quietly arrive. After breakfast, he climbed the spiral staircase to the lantern room. The climb was long, 312 narrow steps. He had climbed them thousands of times. Even now, at 73 years old, he still knew exactly where each wooden step creaked beneath his feet. At the top, sunlight poured through the tall glass windows. The enormous lens sparkled like crystal. Thomas carefully polished every piece of glass with a soft cloth. He believed every sailor deserved the brightest light possible. "It isn't only ships that need guidance," he often whispered to himself. "Sometimes people do too." Few people ever heard him say those words, but somehow they seemed to describe the lighthouse perfectly. By late morning, the village slowly came to life. Fishing boats returned with fresh catches. The little bakery filled the streets with the comforting smell of warm bread and cinnamon rolls. Children laughed as they hurried toward the small schoolhouse near the church. Life was never busy in the village. No one seemed to be chasing time. People greeted one another by name. Neighbors stopped to talk. Even strangers were welcomed with warm smiles. It was the sort of place where everyone believed tomorrow would arrive soon enough. And there was no reason to hurry through today. Every afternoon, Thomas walked down the winding path into the village. He visited the bakery first. Mrs. Carter, who owned the shop, always saved a loaf of fresh sourdough bread for him. "You arrived exactly on time," she would say every single day. Thomas always laughed. "I've arrived at exactly the same time for 20 years. And somehow," Mrs. Carter replied with a smile, "I'm still happy to see you." Thomas thanked her kindly before continuing his walk through the village. He never rushed home. Instead, he stopped whenever someone wished to talk. Some conversations lasted only a minute. Others stretched nearly an hour. Thomas never seemed concerned about the passing time. He believed that listening was never a waste of a day. As the afternoon sun slowly drifted toward the western horizon, a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine trees across the cliffs. Thomas looked toward the empty coastal road. A small blue car appeared in the distance. It was the first unfamiliar vehicle he had seen in several weeks. He watched quietly as it made its way toward the lighthouse. For reasons he could not explain, he had a feeling that this visitor would change more than just another ordinary afternoon. The little blue car came to a gentle stop beside the narrow gravel path that led toward the lighthouse. For a few quiet moments, no one stepped outside. The engine fell silent. Only the distant sound of the waves remained. Thomas stood patiently near the wooden gate. He had learned long ago that people often needed a little time before entering a new place, especially a place that felt unfamiliar. The driver's door slowly opened. A young woman stepped onto the gravel road, carrying a small leather suitcase in one hand and a worn notebook tucked beneath her arm. She paused for a moment and looked up at the lighthouse. Its white walls glowed softly beneath the afternoon sun. The lantern room sparkled against the clear blue sky. Something about the place felt strangely familiar. Not familiar in the way one remembers a childhood home, but familiar in the way a forgotten dream sometimes returns without warning. She took a slow breath. The salty air carried the gentle scent of pine trees and the sea. For the first time in many months, she felt herself breathe without realizing she had been holding her breath. Thomas smiled warmly as she approached. "Good afternoon," he said. "Welcome." The young woman returned a small, uncertain smile. "Good afternoon. My name is Thomas. I look after the lighthouse." She nodded politely. "My name is Emma. It's a pleasure to meet you." Thomas noticed the tiredness behind her eyes. Not the kind that came from a long drive. The kind that came from carrying too many thoughts for too long. He had seen that look before, many times. "Would you like to come inside?" he asked gently. "I've just put the kettle on." Emma hesitated for only a second. "I'd like that." The wooden door opened with its familiar, gentle creak. Inside, the lighthouse felt warm and welcoming. The scent of cedarwood lingered in the air. Old books rested neatly upon tall shelves. A small fireplace quietly crackled in the corner. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, filling the room with a soft, golden glow. Emma looked around slowly. Everything seemed peaceful. Nothing appeared expensive. Nothing seemed perfect. Yet somehow, everything felt exactly as it should. Thomas placed her suitcase near the staircase. "You can leave that here for now. It will be perfectly safe." Emma thanked him quietly. She sat beside one of the windows overlooking the ocean. For several moments, neither of them spoke. There was no awkwardness, only silence, the comfortable kind. Thomas poured hot tea into 2 simple ceramic cups. The gentle aroma of chamomile filled the room. He carried 1 cup to Emma. She wrapped both hands around it, welcoming the warmth. "This is beautiful," she whispered as she looked out toward the sea. Thomas smiled. The ocean has a way of slowing our thoughts. Emma watched a fishing boat drift peacefully across the horizon. "I almost didn't come." Thomas looked at her with quiet curiosity. "But something told you to." She nodded. "I found this lighthouse in an old travel magazine. It was only a tiny photograph, but for some reason, I couldn't stop thinking about it." Thomas looked toward the lantern room above them. "Sometimes, places choose people." Emma laughed softly. "I've never heard anyone say that before. I suppose most people don't." A peaceful silence settled between them once again. Outside, a pair of seagulls circled above the cliffs. The breeze gently brushed against the windows. Somewhere in the kitchen, the old kettle gave one last quiet whistle before falling silent. Emma slowly opened the worn notebook she had been carrying. Its pages were filled with neat handwriting, small sketches, pressed flowers, and tiny pieces of paper tucked carefully between the pages. Thomas noticed the notebook, but said nothing. Instead, he simply asked, "Do you enjoy writing?" Emma smiled. "I used to. And now?" She looked down at the empty page before her. "I think I've forgotten how." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps you haven't forgotten. Perhaps you've simply been waiting for the right place." Emma looked back toward the endless ocean. The waves continued their slow, endless journey toward the shore. They never hurried. they never stopped. Somehow, that felt comforting. Thomas stood and walked toward a small wooden cabinet beside the fireplace. From one of the drawers, he carefully removed an old leather journal. Its edges had become smooth after decades of careful use. The pages inside had turned the soft golden color that only time could create. He placed the journal gently on the table. "This," he said, "is the oldest friend I have." Emma looked at the worn cover with curiosity. "A diary?" Thomas smiled. "Not exactly. It's a collection of people." Emma tilted her head slightly. "I don't understand." "Every person who has ever stayed at this lighthouse has left behind a story. Some wrote only a single page. Others filled entire chapters. They came from different places. They lived different lives. But every one of them left carrying something lighter than when they arrived." Emma slowly traced her fingers along the edge of the old book. "May I read one?" Thomas looked out the window toward the peaceful sea. Then he smiled. "I was hoping you'd ask." Outside, the first hints of evening slowly began to color the horizon. The lighthouse had welcomed thousands of visitors over the years, but neither Thomas nor Emma could possibly know that the next story written inside that old journal would one day become the most unforgettable of them all. Thomas gently placed the old leather journal between them. Its worn cover carried the marks of countless hands that had opened it over the years. The faded leather felt smooth beneath Emma's fingertips. She could almost imagine how many stories had rested inside its pages. The room remained quiet. Only the steady crackle of the fireplace filled the silence. Outside, the evening continued to settle over the coastline. The last hints of daylight slowly disappeared beyond the horizon. The lighthouse lantern awakened once again. Its warm, golden beam began its familiar journey across the dark Atlantic Ocean. Emma watched the moving light through the window. "It never stops," she whispered. Thomas smiled. "No, it never does. Not even during the fiercest storms." Emma looked back at him. "Were you ever afraid?" Thomas leaned comfortably against his chair. "Oh, many times," he chuckled softly. "But after enough years, you learn that fear and respect are two very different things. The sea deserves respect. It doesn't ask for anything else." Emma slowly nodded. She liked the way he spoke. There was never any rush in his voice. Every sentence felt as though it had been carefully carried by the wind before reaching her ears. Thomas opened the journal. The old pages released the gentle scent of aged paper and cedar wood. Each page was filled with careful handwriting. Some letters were elegant, others were uneven. Some pages held only a few sentences, others stretched from top to bottom. Tiny pressed flowers rested between several pages. Small sketches appeared in the corners. A faded train ticket, an old photograph, a single dried maple leaf. Every page seemed to hold a memory. Emma smiled. "It feels alive." Thomas looked down at the journal. I've always believed books remember the people who touch them. Emma looked at him curiously. Do you really believe that? Thomas laughed quietly. I'm not sure, but I like the idea. Outside, the wind brushed gently against the lighthouse windows. The sound was soft, almost like someone humming an old lullaby. Thomas carefully turned another page. This one, he said, was written 23 years ago. Emma leaned forward. A young fisherman stayed here for 3 nights. He believed he had failed everyone who depended on him. He had lost his boat during a terrible storm. He thought his life was over. Emma listened without speaking. Thomas continued. When he left, he smiled for the first time in months. Emma looked surprised. What changed? Thomas slowly closed the journal. I never asked. Emma blinked. You never asked? Thomas shook his head. Some answers belong only to the person who finds them. Silence returned once more. It was never uncomfortable. The lighthouse had a remarkable way of making silence feel like conversation. The fire burned quietly. The tea had begun to cool. Far below the cliffs, the waves continued their endless rhythm. Emma stood and slowly walked toward the large window. The moon now hung high above the ocean. Its silver light shimmered across the water like scattered pieces of glass. She rested one hand against the cool wooden frame. I don't remember the last time I looked at the night sky. Thomas looked at her kindly. Most people don't. They're usually looking somewhere else. Emma watched a shooting star cross the horizon. It disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. She smiled to herself. I used to wish on those. Thomas quietly joined her near the window. So did I. Did your wishes come true? Thomas looked toward the sea. Not the ones I expected, but perhaps the ones I truly needed. Emma thought about those words for a long moment. She realized she had spent most of the past year rushing from one responsibility to another, always chasing tomorrow, rarely noticing today. Somewhere along the way, she had forgotten how peaceful an ordinary evening could be. The lighthouse felt different. Time moved differently here. The clock resting above the fireplace quietly ticked forward. Yet somehow, nothing felt hurried. Thomas glanced toward the kitchen. I believe it's nearly time for supper. Emma turned around. You cook? Thomas smiled proudly. I've managed to keep myself alive for 73 years. I suppose I've learned a few things. Emma laughed. The sound filled the room like warm sunlight. It was the first genuine laugh she had shared in a very long time. Thomas disappeared into the small kitchen. Soon, the comforting scent of fresh bread, rosemary, and vegetable soup drifted gently through the lighthouse. Emma closed her eyes. She breathed in deeply. The smell reminded her of childhood, of rainy evenings, of home. She kinds a why, She owners knew that for the first time in many months, she wasn't thinking about where she needed to be tomorrow. She was simply grateful to be exactly where she was tonight. Outside, the lighthouse continued sending its warm light across the sleeping sea. Inside, two quiet souls shared the beginning of an unexpected friendship. The comforting aroma of rosemary and freshly baked bread slowly filled every corner of the lighthouse. Emma remained by the window for another quiet moment. The moonlight shimmered across the Atlantic Ocean, while the steady beam of the lighthouse continued its endless journey through the darkness. She had never realized how peaceful an ordinary evening could feel. Behind her, Thomas moved slowly around the small kitchen. Every movement was calm. There was no rush. He carefully stirred a pot of vegetable soup that had been simmering for most of the afternoon. The gentle bubbling sound blended perfectly with the crackling fireplace. Emma smiled to herself. It felt less like visiting a stranger and more like returning to a place she had somehow forgotten. Thomas placed two simple bowls on the old wooden table. Steam curled gently into the warm air. Beside each bowl rested a thick slice of homemade bread, still warm from the oven. "I hope you like simple meals," Thomas said with a gentle smile. Emma laughed softly. "I think simple is exactly what I've been missing." Thomas nodded. Most people spend their lives searching for complicated things. They rarely notice that happiness usually arrives quietly. Emma looked around the room once more. The shelves were filled with books that had clearly been read many times. Small wooden boats rested beside old lanterns. A weathered compass sat near the fireplace. Every object seemed to have its own story. "You've lived here for 40 years, Emma said. "Have you ever wanted to leave?" Thomas looked down at his bowl for a moment before answering. "Once." Emma looked up. "Only once?" He smiled. "I was much younger then. I believed the world was somewhere else. So I packed my suitcase. I planned to leave before sunrise." Emma waited patiently. "What happened?" Thomas chuckled quietly. "A storm arrived during the night. The strongest one I'd ever seen. The lighthouse needed someone to keep its light burning. So I stayed. And by morning, I realized I no longer wanted to leave." Emma smiled. "The lighthouse chose you." Thomas laughed. "Perhaps it did." They enjoyed their meal in comfortable silence. Neither of them felt the need to fill every moment with conversation. Outside, the wind whispered gently through the tall pine trees. Far below the cliffs, the waves rolled endlessly toward the shore. After supper, Thomas carried the empty bowls into the kitchen. Emma insisted on helping. "I can wash these." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Guests aren't supposed to do dishes." Emma smiled. "Then don't think of me as a guest." Thomas looked at her for a moment. Then he quietly nodded. "Fair enough." Together, they washed the dishes beneath the warm glow of a small hanging lamp. The simple task somehow felt peaceful. The sound of running water, The soft clink of ceramic bowls, the quiet hum of the wind outside, all blended into a rhythm that calmed the mind. When the last dish had been placed on the wooden rack to dry, Thomas reached for 2 thick wool blankets folded neatly inside a nearby cabinet. "Come with me," he said. Emma followed him up the winding spiral staircase. The narrow wooden steps creaked softly beneath their feet. At the very top of the lighthouse, Thomas opened a small wooden door leading onto the circular balcony. The cool night air greeted them immediately. Emma wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. She stepped closer to the railing. The view took her breath away. The Atlantic stretched endlessly beneath the silver light of the moon. Stars covered the sky in numbers too great to count. The lighthouse lantern slowly turned above them, sending its golden beam across the sleeping sea. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. There was nothing that needed to be said. The silence itself felt complete. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "Do you ever feel lonely here?" Thomas looked toward the distant horizon. "I used to think loneliness meant being alone." He smiled gently. "But the sea taught me something different." Emma listened carefully. You can be surrounded by thousands of people and still feel lonely. You can also sit beneath an endless sky with only the waves for company and feel completely at peace. Emma looked out across the water. She understood exactly what he meant. Perhaps, for the first time in a very long while, she wasn't lonely at all. A shooting star crossed silently above the ocean. Emma watched until it disappeared beyond the horizon. "I almost made a wish," she whispered. Thomas smiled. "What stopped you?" Emma thought for a moment. "I don't think I need one tonight." Thomas quietly looked toward the stars. Sometimes, he thought, that was the greatest wish of all. The lighthouse continued turning above them, patiently, faithfully, as it had done for more than 100 years. And beneath its gentle light, 2 strangers were slowly becoming friends. The night grew quieter with every passing hour. A cool breeze drifted across the lighthouse balcony, carrying with it the gentle scent of salt and pine. Far below, the Atlantic Ocean continued its endless conversation with the rocky shore. The waves came and went, never in a hurry, never truly at rest. Emma leaned against the wooden railing, wrapped comfortably in the thick wool blanket Thomas had given her. Above them, countless stars filled the sky. She had never seen so many. Back in the city, the lights had always hidden them. Here, the heavens felt endless, almost close enough to touch. Thomas stood beside her with both hands resting on the old wooden railing. For many years, this had been his favorite place. Whenever life became uncertain, he climbed to the balcony. The sea always seemed to have an answer, not in words, but in silence. Emma looked toward the distant horizon. "Do you remember every person who came here?" Thomas smiled gently. No, I remember how they felt. Emma turned toward him. What do you mean? I've forgotten many names. I've forgotten many faces. But I've never forgotten the look in someone's eyes when they arrived. He paused for a moment. And I've never forgotten how different those same eyes looked when they left. Emma thought quietly about those words. Did everyone leave happier? Thomas looked toward the sea before answering. Not happier, but lighter. They carried the same lives home with them, the same responsibilities, the same memories, but something inside them had changed. Emma lowered her eyes. I wish it were that easy. Thomas smiled. It isn't easy. It simply takes time. A peaceful silence settled between them once again. The lighthouse lantern continued its slow rotation above their heads. Its warm, golden light swept across the ocean every few seconds. Emma watched each beam disappear into the darkness. Does anyone still write in the journal? She asked. Thomas nodded. Sometimes. Not as often as they once did. He looked toward the old wooden door leading back inside. Would you like to read the very first story? Emma smiled. I would. Together, they stepped back into the warmth of the lighthouse. Thomas carefully closed the balcony door behind them. The comforting heat from the fireplace welcomed them immediately. The old journal still rested on the table exactly where they had left it. Thomas gently lifted it into his hands. He treated it with the same care one might give an old family photograph. Very slowly, he turned the pages. The paper made a soft rustling sound. Finally, he stopped. This is the first story ever written here. Emma leaned forward. The ink had faded slightly with age, yet every word remained beautifully clear. At the top of the page, someone had written a single sentence. To whoever finds peace here after me, may this place remind you that every storm eventually passes. Emma read the words twice. They're beautiful. Thomas nodded. They were written more than 60 years ago. He carefully adjusted his glasses. The writer's name was Samuel. He was a school teacher. He arrived during the coldest winter this village had seen in decades. Emma listened quietly. He had recently lost his wife. Thomas's voice became softer. He believed there was nothing left waiting for him. The fire crackled gently beside them. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the lighthouse windows. Thomas looked down at the page. When Samuel first arrived, he spoke very little. Sometimes an entire day would pass without him saying more than a few words. Emma whispered, "What happened?" Thomas smiled gently. That, he said, is where his story begins. He slowly turned the journal toward Emma. The faded handwriting caught the warm glow of the fire. She took a slow breath. Then, for the first time that evening, she began to read aloud. Outside, the lighthouse continued sending its faithful light across the sleeping sea. Inside, another story quietly waited to awaken. Emma gently rested both hands upon the old journal. For a long moment, she simply looked at the faded handwriting. Every letter had been written with remarkable care. The ink had softened over the years, yet the words still felt alive. Thomas settled comfortably into his chair beside the fireplace. The flames danced quietly against the old stone walls. Outside, the lighthouse continued its faithful watch over the sleeping Atlantic. Emma smiled softly. Then she began to read. My name is Samuel Whitmore. If these pages ever find another weary traveler, I hope they bring you the same quiet comfort this lighthouse once gave me. When I arrived here, I believed I had reached the end of my life. Not because I was old, but because I no longer knew how to keep moving forward. Emma paused. She looked briefly toward Thomas. He simply nodded. She continued. I had been a school teacher for nearly 30 years. Every morning began with the cheerful voices of children. Every afternoon ended with dusty books, unfinished lessons, and hopeful dreams about tomorrow. I loved that simple life, and I believed it would always remain the same. But life has a quiet habit of changing while we are busy making plans. The room fell silent once again. Even the fire seemed to burn more gently now. Emma turned another page. My wife, Eleanor, was the kindest person I have ever known. She believed every flower deserved to be admired. Every stranger deserved kindness. Every sunset deserved a few moments of quiet attention. She often reminded me that the world moves fast enough without our help. I wish I had listened more carefully. Emma swallowed quietly. The words felt deeply personal, almost too personal. Still, she continued reading. One winter, she became ill. The doctors did everything they could. So did I. But some journeys cannot be changed by love alone. When she was gone, the silence inside our little home became louder than any storm I had ever heard. Even the ticking clock sounded unfamiliar. Every chair reminded me she was no longer sitting there. Every morning felt colder than the last. Emma lowered her voice. The lighthouse seemed to grow even quieter. Outside, the waves continued their endless rhythm, never stopping, never rushing. Thomas remained perfectly still. His eyes rested gently upon the fire. He had heard these words many times before, yet they never felt ordinary. Emma turned another page. Friends told me time would heal everything. Perhaps they believed it. I wanted to believe it too. But the weeks became months. The months became seasons. Still, I found myself speaking only to empty rooms. Eventually, I stopped speaking altogether. Emma paused once again. The sentence lingered in the warm room. Neither she nor Thomas hurried to continue. Some words deserved silence after they were spoken. Finally, Emma read the final page of the chapter. One autumn afternoon, a former student visited my classroom. He noticed I had become someone very different. Before leaving, he handed me an old magazine. Inside was a small photograph of a lonely lighthouse standing beside the sea. He smiled and said only one sentence. "If there is anywhere left in the world where silence feels gentle, perhaps it is here." 2 weeks later, I packed a single suitcase, and without knowing exactly why, I began the longest journey of my life. Emma slowly closed the journal for a moment. She looked toward Thomas. "So," she whispered, "this was the beginning." Thomas smiled gently. "Yes, the beginning. Sometimes," he said softly, "the longest journeys begin with the smallest decisions." Emma looked toward the moonlit ocean beyond the window. Somewhere out there, many years ago, Samuel had arrived at this very lighthouse, tired, heartbroken, certain that nothing could ever feel whole again. Yet somehow, he had found the strength to write these pages. Emma wondered what had changed him. Thomas looked at the old journal resting on the table. He gently placed one hand upon its worn cover. "The next chapter," he said quietly, "is where Samuel first met the sea." The lighthouse lantern turned once more, sending its warm, golden light across the endless sleeping ocean. Emma turned the next page with quiet care. The paper had grown thinner near the end of the journal. Its edges were soft from the touch of many hands. She took a slow breath. Then she continued reading. "When I first arrived at the lighthouse, I expected answers. Instead, I found silence. At first, the silence frightened me. There were no busy streets, no crowded classrooms, no endless conversations. Only the sea, the wind, and the steady light that swept across the water every night. For 3 days, I spoke very little. The old lighthouse keeper never asked me to explain my sadness. He simply offered warm meals, a quiet chair beside the fire, and enough kindness to remind me that I was not alone." Emma smiled gently. Thomas quietly looked into the fire. His eyes reflected the dancing flames. Emma continued, "Each morning, I walked along the cliffs before sunrise. The ocean never looked exactly the same twice. Some mornings, it was calm as glass. Other mornings, it danced beneath the wind. Slowly, without realizing it, I began looking outward instead of inward. The weight I had carried for so long became just a little lighter. Not because my memories disappeared, but because I finally understood. Love does not end when someone is gone. It simply changes the way it lives inside us." Emma stopped reading. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the old clock above the fireplace. After a long moment, she turned the final page. "On the morning I left, I climbed to the top of the lighthouse one last time. The keeper stood beside me. We watched the sunrise without saying a single word. Before I walked away, he placed his hand on my shoulder and said, 'Wherever life takes you, be for someone else what this lighthouse was for you. A quiet light, a safe place, a reason to keep going.' I have tried to live by those words every day since. If you are reading this, perhaps you arrived carrying a burden of your own. Do not rush to leave it behind. Sit with the sea, listen to the wind, watch the light. One day, without even noticing, your heart will become lighter too. And when it does, pass that light to someone else. Because the brightest light in this world is the one we quietly share. Samuel Whitmore. Emma slowly closed the journal. For several minutes, neither she nor Thomas spoke. The lighthouse seemed to honor the silence. Outside, the waves continued their timeless rhythm. The beam of light swept across the ocean, just as it had done every night for more than a century. Emma looked toward Thomas. "I think," she whispered, "I understand now." Thomas smiled warmly. "The journal?" Emma gently shook her head. "The lighthouse." Thomas looked out toward the moonlit sea. "It has never been about the building." He rested one hand upon the old journal. "It's always been about giving people a place to breathe." Emma walked quietly to the window. The stars stretched endlessly across the night sky. For the first time in longer than she could remember, her thoughts felt still. Not empty, simply peaceful. She reached for her worn notebook. The same notebook whose pages had remained blank for months. She opened it. Without thinking, she began to write. Not because she had to, but because the words had finally returned. Thomas noticed the quiet smile on her face. He said nothing. Some moments were too beautiful for conversation. Hours later, the first light of dawn slowly appeared beyond the Atlantic. Soft shades of blue, pink, and gold began to paint the horizon. Emma stood outside on the lighthouse balcony beside Thomas. Neither of them spoke. They simply watched another day quietly arrive. Finally, Emma turned toward him. "Thank you." Thomas smiled his familiar, gentle smile. "You'll thank someone else someday." Emma looked puzzled. He nodded toward the lighthouse. "That's how its light keeps traveling." Far below, the village slowly began to wake. Fishing boats prepared for another peaceful morning. Seagulls drifted effortlessly above the sea. The lighthouse continued its faithful watch, patient, quiet, unchanging. Years later, many visitors would arrive at the old lighthouse, carrying worries of their own. Some would stay for only a single afternoon, others for several days. On a small wooden table beside the fireplace, they would find an old leather journal. And near its final pages, they would discover one more story. A story written by a young woman named Emma. It began with a single sentence. "I came here searching for peace, but I left carrying something even more valuable, hope." And so, the lighthouse continued waiting, not for ships alone, but for every tired heart that simply needed a quiet place to find its way home.